Hi, everyone. My name is Charles Varghese, and I'm a marketing specialist here at Study in the USA. Thank you for joining us today for this exciting topic. For those of us, or for those of you who are just joining us, I wanted to once again introduce myself. I'm Charles, and I'll be moderating today's session. We'll just take a couple of moments here before we begin so that more people can join us. But in the meantime, we'd love to know in the comments, what's your favorite sport to watch or play? It's been a few weeks now, but we're back and we'll be continuing our popular series, My Dream, My Destination, alongside our partners, TOEFL. You can check out past episodes by visiting Study in the USA or TOEFL USA on Facebook. We've dedicated this series to sharing the stories and dreams of international students and faculty in the US, stories that are being paved even as we speak. And speaking of stories, some of my favorite stories, and I'm sure some of yours as well, have taken place in sports. Well, it just so happens that today's guest is working towards bringing new life to these stories, helping shape the next generation of sports. Today's guest, Kshaun Kapoor, is pursuing his master's degree in applied data science with a specialization in sports analytics, and will be sharing tips for how you can turn your hobby into a career. But before we can get into that, I'd like to mention that Study in the USA will be providing one special winner with a $50 Visa gift card. To qualify, go ahead and tag your friends in the comment section below, and we'll announce a winner shortly after this session. And towards the end of our session, TOEFL will also be offering a very helpful promo code for $30 off a new TOEFL IBT test registration. So definitely stay tuned for that. Also, we will be having a Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and our guest or one of the TOEFL moderators overseeing the chat will get to answering them shortly. And so with all of that being said, Kshaun, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Kshaunish Kapoor. I am from Mumbai, India. I am currently getting my master's degree in Indianapolis at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. I am pursuing a master's degree in applied data science with a specialization in sports. Yeah, I moved here this year. I'm in my second semester right now. It has been about 10 months since I moved to the US to pursue this master's degree. And it's been great so far. I'm liking what I'm doing. I'm happy to have made this move. And it's nice to be talking to all of you guys.
We're so glad to have you with us today, Kshaun. We're really looking forward to learning more about your story and listening to just everything you have to offer. And so, since so much of your story is intertwined with sports, how did your first love for sports come about, and what were the sports you were drawn to?
Like I said, I grew up in Mumbai, India, so I was always a cricket fanatic. Cricket was the sport that I loved the most, and I played basically all sports when I was younger, but I trained for cricket professionally, and so just following sports, watching a lot of sports, I felt like I had a genuine passion for the game for all kinds of games, and then that's how my journey began, and I started exploring more of that. I started playing a lot more sports. I started competing in a lot of competitions, and I really enjoyed that lifestyle as a youngster. And I feel like I've tried to somehow continue it. And yeah, that's basically when I was younger. I played a lot of sports and I played cricket a lot. So that's how my love for sports first began.
That's awesome. I know your story is similar to probably, I mean, my own and a lot of people watching. Like, we all grew up playing a sport thinking, yeah, we can maybe go professional someday. Speaking on that, you actually did end up going professional for a little bit, but that relationship changes over time. And so, how has your relationship with sports evolved over the years?
It's evolved in many ways, from first being just a fan to then being someone who's like a casual recreational participant in sports to then becoming like a professional athlete who's training for and competing against other athletes and then right now when I'm pursuing an academic career in the field of sports. So my journey, my relationship with sports has evolved over the years. Like as I've grown as a person, my interaction and relationship has grown as well. And it's been great. Like every stage has been something different, and I've learned a lot from each stage of my relationship with sports. It's not just like skills and tangible elements, but also like you learn so much about intangibles like teamwork and discipline and all of that stuff from being involved in sports in general. So it's been a great relationship over the years, and I'm just glad I got to like do so much during my time.
Yeah, really love that. I feel like that's part of the beauty of sports, where it's people can interact with it on different levels, but there's always some way to interact with it for everyone. And so from what I know, you're already pretty deep into your academic career. You earned your degree in business administration from Mumbai, then in sports management from IIM Rohtak, but now you're in the US. What made you decide to pursue your master's in the US of all places?
It's I think a decision that came about that was actually always somewhere in the back of my head that I wanted to pursue an academic degree in the US. And I mean, towards the end when I had to decide what I wanted to get into, I felt like sports was the right path for me. And so the sports industry in the United States is, I feel, the most commercial, the most developed, the most structured and systematic. And just thinking of getting involved in that space was the reason behind me deciding to get a degree in the US and study in the US. So yeah, that the idea of wanting to get involved and work and observe and get that experience of being a sports working in a sports related profession was the reason why I decided to choose to come here.
Yeah, I mean, that really does make sense. Sports is such a universal thing, but I feel like a lot of the major sports leagues do meet in the US too. And so for those who might not be familiar with it, what exactly is sports analytics? How does it impact and shape the future of sports?
So analytics is basically anything and everything to do with data. And I feel like data is becoming, or if it hasn't already become, the most valuable commodity in the world, right? Because all businesses want to make decisions that reduce the element of risk, increase the element of success. And so making sure that you go through data and understand what the data says to you about your customers, about your ticket sales and all of that. That's basically analytics. And so to kind of relate that to the context of sports is every sports team is a business organization. So there's two ways that sports analytics can work for, like primarily there's two ways that sports teams primarily focus on analytics. And one of them is, like I said, the commercial side, like the business side of it, understanding your fans, making sure you connect with them in a way that works best for your team and depending on the region you're in. And then um, improving your ticket sales, improving your merchandise sales, all of those aspects of the commercial side of the business of sports. And then the other side is the implication on the sport itself. So there's a lot of data to be collected and understood regarding the sports statistics. So, for example, basketball has a lot of metrics that the players' normal performance produces. So, just by making sure you go through that data, understand the correlations and all the statistical tools that can apply to improving performance and preventing injuries and making sure that we have, so just collecting all of that data and then analyzing it and then making decisions based on it. That's what sports analytics is about.
That's so interesting. I feel like the use case for sports analytics is almost endless, really. And as you mentioned, you can kind of impact sports in your own way. And so, from someone who did have that competitive spirit, I feel like that's something that could even be a driving force for you. And so, can you tell us a little bit more about the sports analytics program at IUPUI and why you chose it?
Yeah, sure. So I was trying to, I mean, I knew that I wanted to get into sports analytics, but I feel like there weren't a lot of specific programs and courses that offered this specialization. So IUPUIs was one such program that really interested me because it's a great combination of like the technical hard skills that you need in terms of being an analyst, but then it also provides courses on the sports side. So you learn how sports businesses operate, you understand how marketing in the sports industry works, how any specific commercial aspect applies to the sports industry. So I would say that it's a great blend between a technical background and as well like a sport focused application. And that's basically why I chose to do this program. And I'm finding already in my second semester that it's exactly what I wanted to do, and I'm learning a lot. And I'm learning a lot of stuff that is relevant to what I want to pursue after I graduate.
Yeah, it really does sound like it gives you the best of both worlds in a lot of ways. And so is there anything the US you think does differently, or are there any opportunities that maybe living here presents that make studying sports analytics in America so unique?
Yeah, for sure. I think like firstly, the culture of sports is nothing like I've seen before, and every family is involved, and there are high school sports and college level sports that are extremely competitive and professional. So right from a younger age, when kids are just getting into that habit of activity and getting involved in sports, it's very well structured and set up in a way that it promotes excellence. So you're more likely to get involved and become a professional athlete and get a scholarship to go to college. And just seeing that culture, just being involved in that space, and then obviously because there's so much happening and there's high school sports, college sports, professional sports, there's just like a lot of opportunities to get involved, whether that's through volunteering or internships or even just attending matches and just seeing the scale at which they operate. So it's been a great experience so far in this past 1 year, just observing everything that I thought would be true of sports in America, and it's just been great. Yeah.
Yeah, so glad you're enjoying it. And I love how you touched on that opportunity, but also that community aspect of it. Sports really does connect people from all walks of life, no matter how old they are. And it can be something that really brings them together. And so this next question then is for all of you who are watching. Is there anything you've noticed about US sports that has delighted or maybe even surprised you? And so as you all type your answers in the comment section, I just want to remind you that we will be having a Q&A at the end of the session. So feel free to put whatever questions you might have in the chat and we'll get to answering those shortly. And so back to you, Kshaun. You spent most of your studies outside of the US. How often did you use English in your day-to-day life and your studies when you lived elsewhere?
Yeah, I think I was lucky enough to go to a school and later on a college as well, where the primary mode of instruction was English. So I pretty much grew up learning how to speak English, how to read English, and it felt quite like normal to me. And it's the language I've grown up. I feel like I think in English as well, even though it's not my mother tongue. But yeah, I think it comes pretty naturally to me now.
Yeah, so everyone kind of has a different trajectory for when they end up and when they end up there. So opposed to most of our guests to this point, I believe you're one of the first people to move here for graduate studies. So what did you do to immerse yourself in the English language in preparation for your move at that particular stage in your life?
I'd like to say I read a lot of books because that's what everyone says helps with improving our English, but I did not at the time when I was supposed to move. I used to read a lot when I was younger, and that habit slightly got out of me, but I've gotten very into like listening to podcasts and reading articles that are relevant to the field of my interest. So I feel like that helped me a lot because I was just constantly getting attuned to the English language. And Yeah, I think even watching a lot of TV shows and movies in the English language were helpful, but primarily the articles and podcasts that I found interesting were basically in English. So exploring those was something that helped, I think.
I always love hearing people answer that question because you always get something a little bit different. Like the podcast, I've never heard of that before. And then reading sports articles, that's something I do. So I can even relate to that as well. And so, how did you go about learning the nuances of sports and analytics in English?
Um, I would say again, like the articles really helped. Like you can really dive deep into the breadth and it's just like a vast field. Like these sports and analytics are it's I would say a recent development. Like over the last few years, they've really shot up. But there's just like a lot of content and there's a lot of people who are willing to share what they learn or what they have learned about the industry. And so just passing through all of that and going through all the stuff that's happening in the world in this space right now, that helped me learn like the abbreviations, the nuances, all of that, yeah, about this industry.
Yeah, and I definitely think it helps since it is something you are passionate about. It is something you want to learn about. And I think we'll touch on that a little bit later, but I think that is such an important part of this. And so, can you tell us a bit about your decision to take the TOEFL IBT test then? Did you choose to take that test in particular?
Yeah, I think there were two reasons why. One was that it is a universally accepted test, and most universities across the world that require an English proficiency exam accept the TOEFL IBT. So that was one of the main reasons because I knew I needed to prove my English proficiency to the university that I was applying to. And so I decided to go ahead with the TOEFL IBT. And along with that, I also had the option, I recall, to appear for it at home. So that's something I found really convenient. I didn't have to go to a test center. I could just set it up online on my computer and just appear for it from the convenience of my home. So it felt like it would be easier that way. It was a setup that I was comfortable being tested in, and I didn't have to bother about any disturbances, any unforeseen circumstances because I was at home and I can control all of that right before I get into the test taking scenario. So yeah, those two reasons were primarily why I decided to go ahead with the TOEFL IBT.
Yeah, TOEFL is definitely the most flexible of the tests. And like you mentioned, you did take it at home, but for those who might not know, the TOEFL IB is offered in three different ways. So you can choose the best option that fits your unique needs. You can choose from the at-home test at a test center or on paper. So if you are considering taking the TOEFL IBT, I definitely recommend choosing the option that best fits you and your unique style of test taking. And so how did you prepare for taking the test itself? Were there any resources you used to aid you in your studies?
Yeah, I think I got some resources from the TOEFL website, and those were really handy in terms of just getting an idea of the format of the test and what to expect during the test. So those were some resources along with again, just because I feel like I practice the English language every day. Just being more cognizant of that right before a test always helped. So just increasing the number of articles I was reading or the podcasts I was listening to also helped me right before the test.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing that. Having spoken to a lot of international students the past year, I've noticed that a common theme is the confidence you get from knowing English when you come to the United States. How did doing well on the TOEFL exam build your confidence for when you came to study here in the US?
Oh, it definitely helped because here's a certification that qualifies me as proficient English speaker, reader, listener, writer, right? So even though I'm not from this country, I'm not from this place, I feel like I can communicate with the people in this place because of this certification, this proficiency that I have obtained. So it was a good boost for my confidence in terms of knowing that okay, even though I'm not from this place, I am a foreigner. I can communicate with the people very well because I have this TOEFL this TOEFL examination that I've cleared, and yeah, it was always there, like in the back of my mind, that I don't need to be afraid of what I'm saying or who I'm talking to because I know that, and there's a professional organization that is certifying that I know what I know. So that being in the back of my head always helped. That TOEFL score, I always knew that it's gonna be fine when I move to the US. I know I can speak to people here and communicate with them.
That's so awesome. And I think you really captured the essence of the TOEFL test and how important it is and how useful it can be in building your confidence for when you do come to the US. And so, do you have any specific advice for the different sections of the test? The four being reading, listening, speaking, and writing?
Yeah, I think I can go into each of them separately. So for the reading section, I remember that there were passages that related to multiple questions. So usually, what I don't know if this was an approach that I used to follow, where I would read the question and then try to look for the answer in the passage. But I feel like that's not a very appropriate and not the best way of doing things. So I feel like reading the entire passage, making sure you understand what the passage is about, and then looking at each question separately helps because you just know. And when you have to refer to a specific question, you know where you have to look for it and what the answer is, and you've already understood the passage. So I would definitely advise people to like make sure they read the entire passage and then go to the questions because there could be like 3 to 4 questions based on one specific passage. And when it comes to the listening section, making notes helps because you're listening to what the talk is about, and then there'll be questions that are following up that are related to that topic. So it's good to like note stuff down. And this I might advise like a reverse approach to the listening section because you can just like briefly glance at the question and then kind of make a note in your mind about, oh, this is what they might be talking about. And so when that topic pops up in the listening section, just note it down and then you'll be ready to answer the question better. In terms of the writing section, I would say take your time because make sure you hit the nail on all the points that are required from the question. So there might be a couple of guidelines that are offered regarding the structure of your passage and what you have to write. So make sure you follow that and don't go under the word limit, but definitely like try to make sure your passage has like some structure to it, like there's an introduction, a body, and then a conclusion. So it just makes sense. It's good to read. And when it comes to the speaking test, that so just be like it's like a conversation you're having with someone, and although it's directed and structured, um, just be normal and have a conversation like you would with anyone else, even though it's like someone asking you questions and you replying. It just remember in the back of your head that it's a conversation. So listen to what the other person is saying, make sure you understand it, and then you answer it appropriately accordingly.
Yeah, that was honestly all really great advice. And particularly what you said on the reading section. I know that's not something that people hear a lot, but going back and reading through for full context, I feel is really important to showing that you can understand things on a broader scale. And so really appreciate all of that advice that you just gave. And so once again, this next question is for all of you who are tuned in. Is there a hobby that you had that you think you could turn into a career? As you type your answers in the comment section, I just wanted to remind you that we will be having a Q&A at the end of the session. So feel free to put whatever questions you might have in the chat and we'll get to answering them shortly. And so, Kshaun, when did you first realize that you can turn this hobby of yours into a full-time career?
I would say this was sometime when I was in college for my undergrad degree, and I just that is the point when you kind of have to figure out what's next, because up until then, it's pretty much school, next year of school, next year of school, and then college, and then next year of college. But towards the end of your undergraduate program, you have to figure out what you want to do after college, and then you start thinking about things. And I feel like because I was always interested in sports, I started investigating more about the sports industry, the business of sports, and how I could see myself fit into that space and what I would like to do. So that is when I realized that there's like a lot of opportunities out there in the sports analytics industry, and it's a relatively new industry and it's definitely growing a lot. So I felt like this was the right path for me to take up, and I this could be more than a hobby. That's when I realized then.
Yeah, I know the average person might not always be able to do what they love full time. So you're really lucky in that sense. But for those working careers that might not be their quote unquote ideal one, what advice would you give them to find more fulfillment in their current careers?
That's tough because I know, like, even myself, I have had experiences where I was not enjoying what I was doing, but I chose to see that in a way that at least now I know what I don't want to do, so I can start crossing things off a checklist. So I would give that advice to others as well. Just there might be some aspects of your current role that you may not like, but at least you don't want to get more involved in those. So try to find other things within your role that you might like. So, for example, if you're in a marketing role and you don't like a specific aspect of that, you might be more inclined towards some other element of marketing, and just try to focus more on that, be interested in that, and see if you can get more opportunities regarding those kind of projects and those roles. So it's like I feel like you always learn something from every experience. So even if it may not be a positive one and you may not be at the place you want to be for a long time, at least you know that this is not something you would go back to. And so you can start thinking about things you might be interested in switching to instead.
Really love that. And I know that a lot of people sometimes get stuck in this way of thinking where they've invested so much into one major, they've gotten their degree, and they think that they're really just stuck in this one pathway. But as you mentioned, like even in marketing, there's different things you can do. You can be a digital marketer, you can lean into the sales aspect of it, like broaden your perspective, and there's just so much more that's possible for you. And so, on the other hand, for someone who hasn't yet started their career, what advice would you give them in choosing their path?
Um, I I would definitely say, like, be okay with not knowing for sure what it is that you're going to do. I feel like when you're just getting out of college or when you're just starting off your career, you have like a sense of direction about what you want to do, and that's great, but that might not always be the direction you want to do forever. And until you pursue that path, you will not know for sure. So it's all right to not know from the very beginning what you want to do, and if you know it, that's great. Just dive deeper into it and see if it's exactly what you thought you would want to do. And yeah, that's some advice I would give to people starting the career. And also, like, be curious. I would say it's great to kind of keep learning, keep thinking about all the opportunities and options out there, and exploring different paths and different journeys. Just it doesn't hurt, right? Like, you can be doing something, but at the same time you can be interested in something else. So pursue both options, and just keep an open mind to things, and you will eventually figure it out. And if it doesn't happen right away, again, that's all right, because this is just like the beginning of your career, and not everyone has their career figured out by the dot. So take your time with it and be patient, and yeah, just keep going.
Really love that. And I feel like that's advice I could have used just a couple of years ago because
Yeah,
I followed a certain path. I set my mind on something and I kind of didn't see what else was available. And once I did, like I really just fell in love with this whole marketing thing. And now I'm here talking to you. And so I mean, keeping an open mind can really change your whole life in a lot of ways. And
exactly. Yeah.
before we wrap up, I know we just have a couple of more planned questions before our Q&A, but I really wanted to ask this one. What's your dream sports analytics position? And is there a sport or a team you'd want to work for?
Ooh, I feel like there are a couple of positions and a couple of sports I really like. I used to play basketball professionally when I was in India, and I'm a huge basketball fan. So being in the United States with the NBA and with the college sports, basketball here is huge. So I would love to work for a professional basketball team, a college program, and just do work with them because I love being involved in that space. And also, I'm also a huge soccer fan. So Arsenal Football Club is my favorite team of all time. I watch all of their matches, and I make sure to like just stay updated with whatever's happening around that team. So again, that's like also a dream job for me. Yeah.
It is a great time to be an Arsenal fan. And I know we kind of touched on this before, but I was in London earlier this year, and the one soccer match I've ever gone to in my life was actually Arsenal against Manchester City. So that was really cool. And so lastly, we'd love for you to share any further advice for prospective students. If you were to speak to your younger self, what would you say to him?
What would I say to my younger self? I feel like when I was younger, I was not aware of the advice I just gave like a minute ago. So I would just kind of reiterate that to myself that it's going to be all right if you don't figure out right away what you want to do, and just being patient, being curious and open-minded to all the opportunities out there. Also, it's always great to know more about the profession that you're interested in by actually speaking to people who work in that profession. So, connecting with people on LinkedIn is a great resource. So, from what I've observed in my experience, people are always willing to help out, and especially people who have made it at some level in their respective roles. So they would be the most, they are willing to help out people who are just starting out. So anyone, if you are interested in something and you feel like that is a path you want to go down on, you want to pursue, just try to find people who are doing that kind of work already and connect with them on LinkedIn. Tell them you're really interested in this. Be respectful because they are obviously in working position, so they might not always have the time to reply instantly, but just be respectful of their commitments, and just like make sure you mention that you're still a student or you're just starting out your career and you'd like to know more about the field, learn from their experience. And if there's a time that is convenient for them, you can have a discussion. And from what I've observed, most people are willing to help out. So definitely tap into that as a resource.
Well, thank you for that answer, Sean. And at this time, we'll transition into our Q&A portion of the session. So we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. And also, I'd like to once again thank Sean for joining us today and the TOEFL team for making sessions like this possible. And we'll also be sharing a slide with the TOEFL code for a $30 off a new TOEFL IBT test registration. So please be sure to take advantage of that. And so now starting that Q&A, our first question is from Valeria, who asks, which section of the TOEFL IBT test did you find to be the most difficult? And what did you do to prepare for that one specifically?
Um, I I think the reading section was the most difficult for me because there, like I said, it was like a long passage and there were multiple questions related to that one passage. So again, like I just read just right before the exam. I made sure I increased how much I was reading so I could kind of be really quick at reading the passage. So definitely I would advise people to um, leading up to the test, read a lot more than you usually do. So whatever is the daily amount that you read, just try to increase that right before the test so that on test day, you can read the passage, just go through it really quickly, look at the questions, go back to the passage, and then answer the questions.
I think that the more you practice on your weak points, the more you'll find that when the day comes to take the test, that they aren't so overwhelming or scary after all.
Yeah.
And so this next question is from Lindsay, who asks, you are so driven to succeed and make an impact in this world. Curious, what do you do to rest and recharge?
I would say I really prioritize a balance and like having that lifestyle where I can work but also enjoy my time off away from work. So that could be whatever it is you're interested in. Personally, like I'm really interested in sports, so just watching a game is relaxing and helps me recharge. But also going to the gym, working out, playing basketball recreationally and just like doing other stuff youngsters do, hanging out, watching movies with my friends, all of that stuff. It's fun. It's just like it's I need to I prioritize maintaining that balance, and whenever I can do that, I feel it helps me just get back and get my energy charged again.
Feel like we are such similar people because that sounds a lot like how I rest and recharge too. And so this next question is from Gabriel, who asks, what are some movies, podcasts, or TV shows you watch that have helped you immerse yourself in the English language?
Um, That's a difficult question to answer because I've watched and I've consumed a lot of content, let me put it that way. But again, it depends on like what your interest is. So for me, a podcast that I regularly listen to is an Arsenal podcast, and it's a fan podcast. But again, it's in English. The two people who are on that podcast are from the UK and Ireland. So it's also like a different accent that I've gotten used to now because I just keep listening to them regularly. And TV shows, I mean, I've watched a lot of TV shows on Netflix and Prime and all of those platforms. But again, most of them are in English. So it helps. I feel like watching them with subtitles on also helps sometimes. Just there are some words that might slip you by. So I feel like that's helpful to me as well.
I feel like podcasts are such an easy and accessible way to like consume content. And so like one of the ones I like to listen to is Studying the USA is very on International Student Stories podcast, which I mean is just students sharing like incredible stories of the things they've done. So if you have some free time, I highly recommend that you go and listen to one of our episodes. And so this next question is from Abdullah, who asks, how can I improve on the TOEFL speaking section?
I would say just have more conversations with people in English. Like, if that is not your first language, make sure whenever you converse with your friends or your family members, you talk to them in English so you get comfortable with speaking about your daily routine in English, for example, or what you're doing tomorrow or the next day, or what you have planned out for the rest of your semester, for example. Just make sure you talk and converse in English so that on the day of the exam, when you are actually listening to someone talk, you kind of understand how that conversation would flow. And yeah, that's pretty much the biggest advice that I would have for this.
We really appreciate that advice, Sean. And thank you again to the TOEFL team and to you, Sean, for sharing your experiences here today. Sean, we wish you all the best in your graduate studies and your future career in sports analytics. And Thank you again to all of our viewers for joining us on Facebook Live as well. We'll be announcing the winner of the Study USA gift card shortly in the comments. You can also learn more about how to pursue your higher education in the United States by visiting studyusa.com, and more info about the TOEFL test at ets.org/TOEFL. Also follow TOEFL USA and Study in the USA on social for even more resources for your journey towards studying in the US. And if you haven't gotten your promo code yet, it is up on the screen right now, but we hope you all have a beautiful day, and thank you again. See ya.